Welcome, Gun Runner.
After the huge success of the Sega Mega Drive, or Genesis if you're from North America, the Saturn, first released in 1995, was supposed to be Sega's path into the next generation, and it seems as if they were going to have an easy journey too. Their biggest rivals, Nintendo, didn't have a console ready yet, the Atari Jaguar and 3DO were both failing in the marketplace for various reasons, and this left relative newcomers Sony as their only true rival. But Sony had no real experience in the console market, so how were they going to compete against a world recognised and market leading brand like Sega? Well, better than almost everyone expected in fact, as Sega made a catalogue of mistakes that left the Saturn looking like a disaster. People hadn't forgotten the under-supported Mega CD, or the ridiculous decision to produce the 32X add-on, and so Sega were already under massive scrutiny, even before Sony started to gain any real traction. Cue a botched, early US launch that saw Sega annoy many major retailers due to the lack of supply, and also annoy consumers with unfinished and clearly rushed games. The lack of any titles starring their ever popular mascot Sonic the Hedgehog was the final nail in the coffin, and the Saturn ended up being utterly routed by the PlayStation and the much later arriving Nintendo 64 too. Well, in all areas except Japan that is, where the Saturn was a remarkable success and continued to be supported right up until the end of the century, when the Dreamcast took over. This is especially surprising when you consider that no previous Sega console had managed to capture the hearts of the nation, who are usually extremely patriotic to their own companies. It was the strength of the Saturn in this market that has made the machine so collectible today. There is no doubting that this 32-bit console is home to some all-time classic games. And with this there is also a pretty healthy selection of great Sega Saturn exclusives too, that cannot be found on any of its great rivals. So that's what we're going to be looking at here, as I give you the rundown on 10 amazing Sega Saturn exclusives.
Hey, that's Valkyrie.
Does he design the games?
No, he executes them.
Valkyrie, driver 41, ready to download.
Reality always hurts.
Welcome to the real world, Sega Saturn.
While Saturn owners very much bemoaned the lack of a proper Sonic game on the console, which many argue is a key factor in Sega's downfall, the amazingly talented Sonic team did deliver a number of original games, including this one, Burning Rangers, which was one of the last official releases for the Sega Saturn in the West. Speaking of original, the whole concept of this one is certainly that, as you play as a member of the titular group of elite firefighters. Your mission is to enter a series of different structures, putting out the flames and rescuing the people trapped there. I use the word structures because of the wide selection of environments on offer that includes a power plant, an underwater base, and even a space station. You can only transport rescued civilians once you've collected enough crystals. These are left behind by extinguished fires, and a minimum of 5 are needed to engage this transport. The player also receives an energy shield if they use 10. These crystals actually function in similar ways to the rings in Sonic the Hedgehog. As long as you're carrying at least one crystal, you're able to survive damage from enemies or fires. As well as running around each location, you're also equipped with a jetpack that enables you to reach much higher areas. You can also perform acrobatic manoeuvres such as backflips and rolls that are very useful for dodging hazards. The graphics here are excellent, especially some of the transparency effects, and there is great audio too. Burning Rangers is an incredible last hurrah for the PAL Sega Saturn.
You'll be able to go from there.
Eidos Interactive's Crime Wave is a game that really took me by surprise when I first played it, as I'd never really heard of it before. It plays much like a cross between the original 2D Grand Theft Auto and the classic title arcade Game Chase HQ. You take the part of a cop patrolling different areas of the city in your specially equipped sports car. Your objective is to rid the roads of criminals by hunting them down and then blowing them up. You can use your armoured vehicle to run them off the road, or use guns to shoot them down. Rockets can also be collected too, which certainly make things a bit easier and a lot more explosive. Your car also has limited fuel, so you can't take too long exploring the many streets that make up each level. There are other road users on these violent freeways too, who often get in your way, so driving skills are also needed on top of your firearms capabilities. On the early levels it allows you to take them out without a penalty, but this soon changes on the later stages. Catching these criminals earns you money that can then be used to gain entry to the next level, and deductions are made from it for any penalties that you've incurred. Graphically the game is pretty polished with nice rendered cars and lots of nice shading. There's also an excellent soundtrack as well, with some suitably noisy sound effects. Whilst Crime Wave is not the deepest game in the world, and it can get a little bit samey after a while, it is an awful lot of fun and well worth picking up. One of the first games to come out for the Sega Saturn after its launch was the original Daytona USA, a conversion of the Sega AM2 arcade game of the same name. It was supposed to be one of the titles that would really sell the Saturn, especially to Western audiences. Although far from a bad game, the conversion from the original coin-op just seemed very sloppy, with its ugly borders, terrible pop-up and glitchy graphics. Sega were demonised by the press for this, while Sony laughed in their face thanks to the brilliant PlayStation conversion of Ridge Racer. Thankfully Sega decided to act on this and came back with the Championship Circuit Edition, using the vastly superior Sega Rally engine. He also added 2 extra tracks, time attack mode, and also a bunch of new cars too. This new version really does look the business, and both the new tracks are stunning. Look out for the massive Ferris wheel especially. It also plays far better too, with slightly sharper controls and a very welcome split screen 2-player mode. One area where they did miss the mark though was replacing the superb music tracks. Gone are the wonderfully cheesy vocals of the original, and in their place are dull instrumental versions. Shame on you Sega. The new music is not exactly bad, but one of the best things about the original version for me was the music. Had they included it here, there's no doubt we'll be giving this game a 10. Still, Daytona CCE is an excellent racing game for the Sega Saturn, and a massive improvement, in the most part, over the original game. I absolutely love pinball themed video games, utterly adore them in fact, and the good old Sega Saturn has more than its fair share of them. But out of the lot, this one has to be my favourite. A fantastic compilation of 4 different tables, each with their own theme. First up there is Last Gladiators, themed around the violent arena-based sport of Roman times. Next up is Night of the Roses, set in the 16th century where your chivalry will help you save the kingdom. Then there is Dragon Showdown, where you discover that 17th century Japan wasn't a very pleasant place to be, with all the feuding warlords. Lastly we have Warlock. Judgment Day is here, and it's up to you to prevent the end of the world. The tables do vary a bit in quality. Dragon Showdown is a bit crap, whilst Warlock and Night of the Roses are rather good, but the best of them all is undoubtedly Last Gladiators. I can play this table forever. The game is presented just as if you're looking at a real pinball table, with a high resolution tilted perspective. The This can sometimes mean the ball is a bit hard to see as it's hidden behind bumpers, but generally works very well. A special mention must go to the sound in this game, and more importantly the speech. It becomes an integral part of the game as the characters from each table scream at you, taunt you, and make you aware of bonuses. In single player, digital pinball is a blast, but in multiplayer it's even better still, as you compete for that high score. If you own a Sega Saturn, then do yourself a favour and pick this one up sooner rather than later. One genre that was very much all the rage in the 32-bit generation that seems to have somewhat died out since is the mech game. The first one that I played was the absolutely superb Iron Soldier on the Atari Jaguar, which made me seek out more when I moved over to the Saturn. For the ones available for the Sega console, GunGriffon is definitely my favourite, and it just so happens it is also a system exclusive too. The game is set in 2015, where European nations are fighting it out for the last remaining natural resources to keep their war machines rolling. In the game you get to control one of these giant war machines as you forge a path of destruction across the Soviet region. All the action is viewed from a first person perspective with an on-screen HUD that displays all your critical info like weapon status, shields, enemy radar and current location, as well as an advanced targeting system. Each mission takes place in a different area, and not only does the landscape vary, but also the conditions too. So you have levels that take place at night, in the snow, and even inside a giant underground base. There are 8 stages in total, and mission objectives vary from all-out destruction to protection and rescue missions, which require a lot more stealth. You have 4 weapons at your disposal from the start: standard cannon, machine gun, homing missiles, and bombs that do huge amounts of damage and are best saved to when you really need them. GunGriffon has great 3D polygon visuals, rocking music, and some seriously challenging gameplay to keep you at it. While driving games are a real strong point of the Saturn's library, you couldn't help but pass an admiring eye at Gran Turismo on the PlayStation back in the day. With its selection of real cars and gorgeous graphics, it was a title that really helped the PS1 win the 32-bit war. Also known as 2J King of Spirits in Japan, 2J basically means drift from what I understand. This is as close as you're going to get to Gran Turismo on the Saturn. There is no doubt that this game has the best 3D engine of any racer on the machine. While looking a lot like Gran Turismo visually, it's actually quite different in its gameplay style, as High Velocity is a pure racing game. The idea is to compete in a series of races against an opponent and beat them. There are different classes of race, all ranging in difficulty, and a wide range of different locations to race in. One really unique feature is the 2-player split screen mode, that allows you to split the screen horizontally or vertically. The cars on offer are all Japanese and include recognisable names like the Toyota Celica, Mazda MX-5 and Nissan Skyline. You can also choose the colour of your car and configure it to your own taste too. This title really does look staggering, the draw distance is amazing and the level of detail really needs to be applauded. It would be hard to find a better looking game on the Saturn in all honesty. The soundtrack is also pretty good and the game controls like a dream. High Velocity is a game that should be right at the top of anyone's Sega Saturn shopping list, and it's criminal that it never got a release in Europe. If you thought that the original Panzer Dragoon on the Saturn was stunning, then you ain't seen nothing yet. Panzer Dragoon 2, or Zwei, to use its correct but strangely Germanic title, takes everything from the original game and improves it in almost every single way. The beautiful graphics of the first game have been improved on further with a much better draw distance, better frame rate and even more detail. The audio has also been improved. The noise of those flapping wings is one of the most soothing sounds I've ever heard in a video game. It's still on rails but is now a lot less limited, with more movement around the various landscapes, and multiple routes are made available at certain points during the game. You also have an upgraded weapon, as well as the standard shot from the first game. You now have a new multi-shot that can be used somewhat like a smart bomb. To operate this, you hold down the button, then lock it onto enemies by moving the crosshair over them. Letting it go unleashes a furious stream of focused energy. This is especially useful on the bosses, as now you can get multiple hits on different parts of them. The boss fights definitely drag on a lot less in this game thanks to that. The story has also been evolved too, with longer FMV sequences in the game's own special language. This incredible sequel just gets more and more impressive as it goes on. The water effects on the cave levels in particular are absolutely jaw-dropping. If you have a Sega Saturn, then you should already own Panzer Dragoon Zwei. There's really no argument not to. The sublime Revenge of Shinobi was the very first game I purchased for the Mega Drive when I owned one back in the day, so you can imagine that I was pretty excited to see a new Shinobi arrive on the Saturn in 1995, especially as it seemed to follow a very similar gameplay style with its clever mix of fighting, platforming and adventuring. Also known as Shin Shinobi Den in Japan and Shinobi Legions in North America, the game certainly has a great deal of similarities with both Revenge of Shinobi and the Mega Drive sequel Shinobi 3. But there are a number of quite interesting changes that I will endeavour to detail more. Firstly, there is the attack system that splits your katana and shurikens into separate buttons and makes you a lot more reliant on the former. In addition to this, the famous ninja magic that appeared in all the previous Shinobi games has gone, and in its place is a new power-up system that gives you a number of temporary special abilities such as clone shields and a larger, more powerful sword. You can also pick up extra health and shurikens as you progress too. As before, a boss must be defeated at the end of each level, and each requires different tactics. I mentioned earlier that this game is known under different titles in different markets, but it's also worth noting that the name isn't the only change, because PAL Shinobi X actually has a different and much better soundtrack compared to all the other versions too. Add the great graphics and slick gameplay into the mix, and you have one of the best reasons out there to own a Sega Saturn. This fairly early title for the Saturn caught me rather by surprise, so I was pretty much expecting a bland on-rail shooter like Star Fox or something more akin to Afterburner, but in reality Wing Arms is a very nice mission-based 3D combat simulation. You start the game by choosing from a selection of very different looking planes. They range from one that looks like a World War II Spitfire to a massive seaplane. Once into the game you have a choice of viewpoints too, a traditional flight simulator like cockpit view and a more arcade-like third-person perspective, which is very much like Afterburner. I should also mention that before the level starts you're treated to a mission briefing by a man that looks like a puppet, whose mouth doesn't match the dialogue spoken. I'm guessing this is due to a language translation. During gameplay you have machine guns and a limited amount of missiles to use against the enemy. Your aircraft also has a shield, shown via an on-screen bar, that depletes as you're shot. Levels take place in the air as well as over ground and water, giving some nice variation in the scenery. Your targets can also vary quite a lot too, from various aircraft to static enemies and buildings. Wing Arms manages to create an almost perfect mix between the flying and pure arcade action, and it's all presented in smooth 3D. It certainly provides a far more compelling experience than previous Sega flight games like Afterburner and G-Log. For this reason, I think this makes it a great addition to any Sega Saturn collection, and a game that might surprise a few people out there. The arrival of the 32-bit generation saw the humble footy game become more than just another sports genre. It became a system seller, a trend that lives on today with the FIFA and PES games. The first game to truly show this newfound potential was the 3DO version of FIFA, soon followed by the impressive looking, at the time anyway, International Victory Goal on the Saturn. Both those games soon started to show their flaws, being more about flashy graphics than actual gameplay. Sega soon came back with Worldwide Soccer 97, which used a 3D view pitch with multiple camera angles, goal replays, realistic animation, fully editable roster, custom tactics, and superb commentary from the one and only Gary Bloom. At the time, it just seemed so much more realistic than any other football game out there, and as an avid football fan myself, I was absolutely blown away by it when I first played it. As good as that game was, there were still a few minor flaws like the rubbish goalkeepers and lack of club teams, so Sega had another go the year after with this nicely finessed follow-up. Game options include that old favourite, the two-player versus match, as well as a tournament mode that plays very much like the World Cup, but now we also have club-based league and cup competitions too. There's also an additional commentator in the form of legendary Republic of Ireland manager and England World Cup winner Jack Charlton, who now adds a bit more colour to the action. Worldwide Soccer 98 isn't just a great footy game for the Saturn, it's one of my favourite footy games ever.
England have got to reorganise and try and get back in this game fast. Well, there was always a possibility of this happening. He's not afraid to hold on to the ball. Superb pass!
Let's compare Sega Saturn's games to games on Plaything. Sega has a long history of creating true arcade games. Plaything's maker has no such history. Sega Saturn gives you arcade graphics and gameplay that could only come from the power of 3 processors. Plaything has only 1 processor. Sorry, Plaything, you are not worthy.
And that rounds up my look at 10 amazing exclusives for the Sega Saturn. Can you think of any other one-off titles for the 32-bit beast that should have made the list? Or do you think some of these games were unworthy of inclusion? I always love to hear the thoughts and views of my audience, so please get typing in that comment section. Before I go though, I must thank all of my loyal patrons who continue to support my channel and make videos like this possible. However, I must give special thanks to the following patrons in particular, their much appreciated pledges: D. Vaughan, Mitchell Valentino, Neptune, Seth A. Robinson, Carl Olsen, Aussie B, Dos Gamerman, Grady Haynes, Paul Daniel, S-Mania999 and Electron Star Collapse. If you also want to help support all my creative endeavours, including this YouTube channel, then please go and check out my Patreon right now. You can get access to host extra content, including downloads, exclusive videos, creative insights and much more besides. I've been the Laird, I thank you for watching and I'll see you all again for another video very soon.